when my daughter Elaine declared, "You'll either cater to Liam or vacate my property." My usual temper remained locked away. I simply offered a faint smile, picked up my travel bag, and stepped out, abandoning the residence I'd poured my entire working life into. She undoubtedly expected the familiar tears, the desperate plea. But this time, the script had completely flipped. Just a week later, my phone log showed 24 missed calls, and that was only the prelude to my strategy. They would soon learn the profound error of their ways. The heavy brass keys felt strangely warm in my grip as I nudged open the front door, the edges of the grocery bags already chafing my wrists. Saturday afternoon light, usually so comforting, streamed through the living room drapes, painting the space in a gentle, almost angelic glow. But the piece was a lie. Liam Thorne was utterly sprawled across my antique armchair, Eleanor's final comfort to me before her illness claimed her. His sock-clad feet were propped high, a half-empty craft beer bottle swaying precariously from his fingertips. The TV remote lay balanced on his gut, as if he were the unchallenged lord of this domain, which, of course, he absolutely believed. His gaze never flickered from the basketball game. "Fetch me another ale from the fridge while you're standing," he grunted, as if I were a servant. I deliberately lowered the heavy grocery bags, feeling the insistent pull of milk jugs and bread loaves. Raw red grooves already scored my palms. "Pardon?" I queried. "You heard me," Liam replied, his eyes glued to the screen. "That imported stout, not your usual watery lager." A sudden chill, sharp and unwelcome, spread through my chest. That specific stout, I'd purchased it exclusively for him, spending a chunk of my pension on a brew I wouldn't even sample. "Liam," I began, voice strained. "I literally just walked in. These groceries need unpacking." Finally, he bothered to look. That familiar condescending smirk spread across his face, clearly announcing that I was the one being preposterous, the one creating unnecessary fuss. "What's the difficulty? You're already on your feet." "I'm quite settled." "The difficulty," I stated, "is that this is my home." Liam's large feet hit the polished floorboards with a jarring thud. He rose slowly, deliberately, using his considerable height as an intimidation tactic. At 32, he's certainly towering over me, broader and stronger, but I'd navigated far tougher personalities long before he drew his first breath. "Your home, amusing," he scoffed. "Because your daughter and I reside here. We cover the expenses with my income. Minor details." He advanced the bottle still clutched in his hand. "Listen, Arthur," Liam sneered. "We can handle this smoothly, or we can handle this roughly. Wish to continue your tranquil existence under our roof, then you conform. It's truly that straightforward." At that moment, the kitchen door swung wide. Elaine emerged, her usually immaculate blonde hair pulled back in a hurried bun, a dish towel clutched in her hand. Her eyes scanned the tableau, Liam looming over me, the air crackling with unspoken hostility. "What's happening here?" Elaine's voice held that familiar edge, a tone I remembered all too well from her adolescent years. "Your father's being entirely unreasonable," Liam declared, never once breaking his stare from me. "I simply requested a drink, and he's turning it into an international incident." Elaine's gaze settled on me, brimming with that same old disappointment, as if I were a petulant child. "Father, just fetch him the beverage. It's not worth the dispute." But Liam wasn't finished. He closed the distance between us, the stale scent of ale heavy on his breath. "Look, Arthur, this is how things operate. You reside in our home. You contribute. That means when I make a request, you fulfill it. No questions, no insolence. Our home. I maintained an impossibly steady voice, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Indeed. Elaine moved to stand shoulder to shoulder with her husband, a formidable, united front. Father, you must make a choice right now. Either you assist Liam and comply with his directives, or you gather your belongings and depart. The words hung in the suffocating silence. I searched my daughter's eyes desperately, seeking a glimmer of the little girl who once sought refuge in my arms during tempestuous nights. She merely stared back, her expression mirroring Liam's entitled smirk. Very well, I responded, my voice barely a whisper. Liam's grin widened, certain of his triumph. Excellent. Now regarding that ale, I'll pack. The smirk vanished from his face, replaced by outright confusion. Elaine's jaw dropped slightly. She had clearly anticipated my immediate collapse and apology, a shuffling retreat towards the kitchen, like a defeated cur. I pivoted on my heel, leaving the overflowing grocery bags to slump beside the front door. Behind me, I registered Liam Thorne's sharp gasp. Elaine Vance's hushed plea. Father, wait. But I was already moving my gait unhurried across the polished hardwood that Eleanor and I had painstakingly restored 2 decades prior. The familiar weight of my travel trunk descended from the top shelf of the bedroom closet. It was the one I'd purchased for our honeymoon to Glacier National Park, when Eleanor was still vibrant and our future had gleamed with infinite possibilities. Now it lay open on the bed, a gaping maw, waiting to consume the paltry remnants of my life within these walls. My packing was precise, almost surgical. Underwear, socks, 3 sets of practical clothing. Not everything, just what was absolutely necessary. From the living area, I could discern the muted drone of urgent whispers, Liam's voice occasionally rising above Elaine's softer, more hesitant tones. They were undoubtedly formulating a strategy attempting to comprehend this elder's unexpected act of defiance. My hands worked with an almost preternatural calm, folding shirts, rolling ties. Eleanor's worn photograph, tucked carefully into a silk handkerchief, was slipped into the suitcase's side pocket. My daily medications, my reading spectacles, the small leather-bound ledger where I fastidiously tracked every expense. When I finally wheeled the trunk into the hallway, their voices abruptly ceased. Liam had returned to his armchair, but his posture was transformed, no longer languid, but rigid, a predator assessing its prey. Elaine stood framed in the kitchen doorway, her arms tightly folded, attempting to project sternness, but betraying a clear flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Neither of them offered a single word of farewell. My ancient sedan rumbled to life on the first turn of the key, as dependable as ever. I reversed out of the drive, my gaze fixed resolutely forward, refusing to acknowledge the house, or whether they stood peering from the window. The 20-minute drive to the town's edge, where the riverside motor court beckoned, offered a much-needed expanse of silence. Memories began to cascade through my mind as I navigated the quiet streets of Cedar Creek. Elaine's exorbitant university tuition, that $40,000 annually, for that exclusive liberal arts college she had insisted upon. I had clocked relentless overtime at the bank for nearly 5 years, juggling extra clients, staying until the late hours, poring over intricate loan applications. My hands still ached from the phantom memory of countless forms. Her wedding had set me back $30,000. Liam's family had conveniently found themselves unable to contribute their agreed-upon half, so I'd quietly absorbed the entire cost, loath to cause any awkwardness. The grand ballroom, the exotic florals, her couture gown, everything had to be impeccable for my daughter's momentous day. Then came the house, a crushing $100,000, from my dwindling retirement savings for their initial down payment, because young couples, I'd convinced myself, needed a substantial leg up. That's what devoted fathers did, I'd rationalized. That's precisely what Eleanor would have wanted, and the monthly financial contributions had followed with clockwork predictability. $1,500 for their mortgage, $400 for utilities, $600 for groceries when their budget grew tight. My Social Security income had steadily vanished into the sprawling tapestry of their lives, thread by thread, and I had repeatedly assured myself it was an act of profound love. The Riverside Motor Court was a squat, nondescript building on the far side of town. Its once vibrant paint faded its neon sign, stuttering erratically. The room was sparse, yet meticulously clean. A single bed, a lone chair, a modest table tucked beneath the window. I deposited my suitcase onto the luggage rack and sank heavily onto the mattress's edge. The silence here was utterly different. Not the comforting quietude of my own cherished home, but the stark, echoing emptiness of a temporary haven. I extracted my phone and began scrolling through my contacts list. Bank numbers, insurance providers, credit card companies, digits. I'd known by heart from 4 decades in corporate finance. Tomorrow was a Sunday, but there were still avenues to explore. Certain calls could still be initiated. I unfolded my laptop on the small table and logged into my online banking portal. Account balances glowed back at me from the screen checking savings retirement funds. Numbers that represented a lifetime of meticulous planning, of denying myself countless small pleasures to ensure my family's well-being. The cursor pulsed steadily in the search bar, awaiting my next command. Sunday morning dawned a dreary, overcast canvas that mirrored my internal landscape perfectly. I meticulously arrayed my financial paperwork across the motel table, like a general plotting an intricate campaign. Bank statements, investment portfolios, legal documents, every item organized. With everything precisely arranged, the first strategic move was contacting the Regal Trust and Savings. Sunday's operational hours were notoriously restrictive, yet the labyrinthine automated systems operated without pause. After navigating the familiar voice prompts, a polite representative greeted me. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. How may I assist you today?" My request was concise. I need to revoke the automatic mortgage contribution for the residence at 847 Elmwood Lane, account number ending in 4729. A brief silence, then the distinct tap of keyboard keys. "Sir, our records indicate this payment has been consistently active for 5 years. Are you certain you wish to terminate it?" "Absolutely certain," I affirmed. "May I inquire as to the rationale for this alteration?" The question was standard, devoid of true curiosity. The current occupants no longer meet the criteria for my continued financial sponsorship. More data entry sounds. "Understood, Mr. Vance. The automated transfer will be nullified with immediate effect. A written confirmation will be dispatched to you within 3 business days. The next call to Evergreen Mutual proved considerably less taxing. For 3 long years, I had been footing the bill for their vehicle insurance, Liam's hefty truck and Elaine's compact sedan. A relentless $280, extracted monthly for conveyances I never touched, for potential mishaps I'd never precipitate. "I require the immediate removal of 2 vehicles from my policy," I informed the agent. "My daughter and son-in-law will now be responsible for securing their individual coverage. When would you prefer this adjustment to become active?" "Today," I stated without hesitation. The credit card adjustments, however, demanded more time. Elaine, an authorized user across 3 of my primary accounts, a Visa, a MasterCard, and the Maplewood department store card, represented a more complex disentanglement. For months I'd been consistently covering a monthly sum of $500 clearing debts I hadn't incurred for purchases I'd never sanctioned. The Visa representative, after a brief pause, elucidated Mr. Vance. Discontinuing authorized users means they will need to apply for their own lines of credit. Any existing balances will, of course, remain your liability, but they will be unable to initiate new charges. I grasped the implications fully, I responded. Proceed with their immediate removal. With each completed call, a palpable burden seemed to lift from my weary spirit. 4 decades spent navigating the intricacies of corporate finance had instilled in me an intimate understanding of these systems, their inherent logic, their precise legal frameworks, their rigid procedures. Every action I undertook was meticulously within my established rights. The modification to my life insurance policy destined for a new beneficiary necessitated formal written documentation, yet I initiated that crucial process as well. $100,000 once earmarked exclusively for Elaine, a sum painstakingly accumulated to safeguard my family's future. But the very definition of family had in recent days undergone a profound and disquieting reevaluation. By the stroke of noon, I had successfully executed 8 such calls: mortgage contributions, severed vehicle insurance, coverage, suspended credit lines, restricted the various automatic transfers that had for years silently siphoned my resources, now conclusively halted. Every interaction concluded with professional courtesy and the requisite confirmation numbers. I leaned back into the worn upholstery of the budget motel chair, surveying the meticulous notes laid out before me. A litany of confirmation numbers, reference codes, and vital effective dates. The indisputable paper trail of my newfound financial autonomy. My mobile lay inert on the small table. Not a single missed call, not an urgent text message. They remained oblivious, I mused. Their awareness would likely dawn only when the first automated payment failed, or when a crucial bill arrived, addressed to their names instead of mine. But the reckoning was imminent. I shut the lid of my laptop and approached the window. In the parking lot below, an elderly gentleman was methodically loading luggage into the bed of a weathered pickup, his wife supervising the task with an air of understated competence. Perhaps they were returning from visiting grandchildren or embarking on a long-cherished, long-deferred holiday. I found myself envying their seamless collaboration, the effortless choreography of a life spent together. Eleanor and I had shared such a bond once upon a time. A sudden vibration on the tabletop startled me. My phone, an unknown number. I allowed it to ring unanswered. The subsequent week unfolded with a profound tranquility for me, though clearly the same could not be said for them. I had established a peaceful rhythm at the Wayfarer's Lodge. Mornings began with coffee from the compact lobby, followed by breakfast at the quaint diner down the street, and extended strolls through Willow Creek's serene residential areas. My phone, however, became a repository for an ever-increasing tally of missed calls, a collection I had no desire to begin. By Wednesday, a dozen voicemails awaited. By Friday, that number had swelled to 22. I meticulously played them back, tracing their chronological descent from initial bewilderment to simmering resentment, then to outright desperation. The earliest messages possessed an almost nonchalant quality. Elaine's voice tinged with a mild inquiry about a potential technical glitch concerning the mortgage deduction. Liam, for his part, left terse, vexed notes about an unexplained lapse in their vehicle insurance coverage. But by the middle of the week, by midweek, true alarm had set in. "Father, what on earth is happening?" Elaine Vance's voice, usually so composed, was frayed with raw frustration. "The bank just informed us you've halted the automated mortgage payment. They're demanding the entire sum by week's end or initiating foreclosure actions." Liam Thorne's voicemails grew increasingly venomous. "Arthur, you have to rectify this immediately. My colleagues are questioning my vehicle coverage. You're making us appear utterly irresponsible." The subsequent calls spiraled into desperate pleas. Elaine, her voice thick with tears, pleaded for me to return her call, promising any compromise. Liam even attempted a conciliatory tone, insisting he'd been unduly severe and wished to mend fences. I systematically erased each message. After listening a detached, almost academic curiosity, my only response to their escalating panic. Thursday morning brought a sharp rap on the modest door of my temporary lodging. Peeking through the small aperture, I observed them both. Elaine in a rumpled cardigan, Liam still in his work attire, both bearing the unmistakable signs of a sleepless night. I unlatched the door but made no gesture of welcome. "Father." Elaine's eyes were bloodshot, her carefully constructed poise shattered. "We absolutely must discuss this." Liam shoved past her, his face a ruddy mask of fury. "About how you're systematically dismantling our existence because of a petty squabble over a simple drink. I am dismantling nothing." I stated, my voice level. "I am merely ceasing to underwrite your lives." "The mortgage, Arthur." Liam's voice escalated into a near shout. "You can't arbitrarily halt the mortgage payments. That's our residence." In actuality, it is my residence, my designation on the deed, my endorsement on the loan agreements. You two were merely tenants. Elaine seized Liam's arm as he surged closer to the threshold. "Father, please. We can absolutely find a resolution. Liam was out of line speaking to you that way. We both were. But you cannot simply abandon us without a single word of caution, no prior discussion. You presented me with an ultimatum," I calmly reminded her. "Comply with Liam's demands or vacate the premises. Those were your precise instructions. I never intended it that way." "Yes, you did." I fixed my gaze on my daughter, seeing not my Elaine, but a stranger inhabiting her features. "You intended every single word. You simply never anticipated me selecting the alternative." Liam attempted a more composed demeanor, his voice unnaturally placid. "Listen, we've all uttered regrettable words in the heat of the moment, but you're discussing our abode, our financial standing, our entire future. You cannot simply unilaterally withdraw your support like this." "I can, and I have." I began to gently push the door shut. "You desired my departure. I departed. You wished to manage your own affairs. Now you possess that autonomy." "Father." "Wait." Elaine's voice fractured. "What about kinship? What about the entirety of our shared history?" I hesitated, my gaze tracing the contours of her desperate countenance. For a fleeting instant, I recalled the young girl who once assisted me in gathering autumn leaves, who presented me with small bouquets of dandelions plucked from the lawn. But that innocent child had matured into an adult capable of observing without intervention as her spouse demeaned her own father within the sanctity of his personal dwelling. "Family is a reciprocal agreement, darling," I murmured. "I dedicated decades to supporting you both. When the moment arrived for you to reciprocate that care, your allegiance shifted." Liam's feigned composure fractured completely. "You deranged old fool, you can't just—" "I can summon law enforcement if you persist in escalating your volume," I interjected, cutting him off. "This is private premises, and your conduct constitutes a breach of the peace." They stared at me, perhaps truly seeing me, for the first time, in recent memory. Not the obliging, soft-hearted patriarch, nor the convenient walking ATM, but simply a man who had at long last discovered the power of refusal. Liam seized Elaine's arm firmly. "Let's go. We'll solve this on our own." They retreated towards their vehicle, Liam's characteristic swagger replaced by a worried, hunched posture. Elaine glanced back over her shoulder, her expression that of someone confronting an utter stranger. I observed their departure, then deliberately closed the door and returned to my open laptop. There remained additional calls to be placed, more financial connections to be severed. The intricate process of deconstructing a lifetime's financial and emotional entanglement was nowhere near completion. I needed a strong coffee and an opportunity for undistracted thought. The quaint diner on Maple Street had consistently served as my sanctuary when Eleanor was still with me. She would often join me there after her medical appointments, and we would invariably share a slice of. The quaint diner on Maple Street had consistently served as my sanctuary when Eleanor was still with me. She would often join me there after her medical appointments, and we would invariably share a slice of apple pie while discussing nothing important. Tuesday morning found me walking the familiar 3 blocks, my breath visible, in Willow Creek's crisp autumn air. The methodical rhythm of my steps felt grounding after yesterday's emotional maelstrom. I'd organized my financial paperwork again this morning, reviewing bank statements and confirmation numbers like a general studying battle plans. The diner's bell chimed as I entered, the aroma of fresh brew and sizzling bacon, creating that comforting fog of normalcy I craved. I'd barely settled into my usual corner booth when a familiar voice called out, "Arthur Vance." Well, I'll be damned. Frank Davies rose from a table near the window, a newspaper folded under his arm. We'd worked together at Regal Trust and Savings for 15 years before his transfer to the main branch. Frank had handled commercial loans while I managed personal accounts, but we'd shared enough coffee breaks to consider ourselves friends. "Frank," I said, at rising to shake his hand. "Good to see you." "Mind if I impose?" I slid into the opposite seat without waiting for an answer. "Haven't seen you since Eleanor's service. Heard you moved out to the Wayfarer's Lodge." Frank said, his brow furrowing slightly. "Everything all right?" The waitress appeared with coffee before I could answer. I used the interruption to consider how much to share. Frank was trustworthy, but he was also a banker with professional obligations. "Family situation," I said finally, my voice carefully neutral. Needed some space to think things through. Frank nodded slowly, studying my face. "That son-in-law of yours tried to pull a fast one on us a few months back." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "What kind of fast one?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Wanted a substantial home equity loan on your house. 50,000 to be precise." Frank's expression darkened. Claimed it was his property. Brought in documentation and everything. The diner's ambient noise seemed to fade. "My house," I repeated the words, tasting like ash. He claimed ownership of my house. That's right. Had some paperwork that looked official at first glance. But when we ran the title search, Frank shook his head slowly. "Everything came back to you, of course. Clean title, no co-signers, nothing that would give him any claim to the property." I set my cup down, carefully processing this information. When exactly did this happen? December, maybe January. I handled the application personally because of the amount involved. Frank leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Arthur, he wasn't just mistaken about ownership. This was deliberate fraud. The documents he brought in were forged. The implications hit me like a splash of ice water. 3 months ago, Liam had been planning to steal from me. This wasn't desperation born from our current crisis. This was premeditated deception. Did you report it? I asked. We rejected the application and flagged his information in our system. Technically, since no money changed hands, it's a gray area legally, but I kept copies of everything. Frank studied my expression. You really didn't know about this? I shook my head, thinking about all those monthly payments I'd been making, all the dinners where Liam had complained about money troubles while planning to rob me behind my back. What was he going to use the money for? Frank glanced around the diner, then leaned closer. According to his application, home improvements, but word around town is Liam's got gambling debts. Pretty substantial ones. How substantial? Detective Miller might know more. You remember Detective Miller? He mentioned something about Liam being a regular at the Golden Spire Casino. I did remember Detective Miller. We'd served on the church building committee together, and his daughter had been in Elaine's graduating class. If Jim had information about Liam's gambling, it was probably accurate. Frank, I appreciate you telling me this. I pulled out my wallet to pay for coffee I'd barely touched. Arthur, be careful. Frank's voice was low and serious. A man who'd forged documents to steal from family might do other desperate things when he's cornered. I walked back to the Wayfarer's Lodge with my mind racing. Liam's beer demand and disrespect suddenly clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. The pieces slotted into place with an unnerving precision. He had already seen me as an unwitting ATM, a convenient, endlessly renewable source for his insatiable habit. His demand for deference wasn't about petty power plays. It was a desperate maneuver to safeguard his pipeline to my funds he already considered his by some warped decree. Returning to my solitary room, I powered up my laptop and titled a fresh file, Thorne Investigations Deception Ledger. Frank's bombshell had ripped open a deeper chasm of deceit than I'd imagined. What other layers of subterfuge lay hidden beneath Liam's smug facade? The county seat's clock was ticking towards 5. I had barely an hour to formalize the proceedings that would upend their world. Following a hasty lunch, I drove directly to the old Dominion Courthouse, a granite edifice that once symbolized oppressive bureaucracy, but now felt like an instrument of justice. The clerk's office on the 2nd floor was managed by a woman with an unflappable air who began processing my notice of repossession. "Mr. Vance," she stated, her gaze flicking between my submitted deed and the eviction forms. "This is currently registered as your daughter's residence, isn't it?" "It is unequivocally my property," I affirmed. "The occupants have fundamentally violated the terms of their tenancy." "And what terms would those be, sir?" Her tone was neutral, professional. "A standing verbal agreement mandating mutual respect and proportional contribution to household expenditures." I recited the words carefully chosen. "Both stipulations have been flagrantly disregarded." With a decisive, practiced flourish, she affixed her stamp to the documents. "The 30-day notice period commences today," she clarified. "Should they dispute the filing, a hearing will be scheduled. Otherwise, the final repossession order will be served by the Sheriff's Department upon expiration of the term." "How soon can they expect notification?" I inquired. "Process service is typically completed within 48 hours by the Sheriff's Department." I thanked her, gathering my copies, a profound sense of vindication washing over me. No more underhanded tactics or emotional coercion. Everything was now proceeding according to the strictures of the law. My next destination, the local constabulary. Detective Jim Miller's office occupied a secluded nook at the rear of the precinct, a cluttered cubicle overflowing with precariously stacked case files and forgotten coffee mugs. Jim looked older than I remembered, his temples frosted with more gray deeper furrows etching his eyes, yet his grip remained as solid as ever. "Arthur," he greeted, a faint smile on his lips. "What brings you to my less than glamorous domain?" "A bit of fact-finding," I replied. "Frank Davies suggested you might possess some insight into Liam Thorne's gambling habits." Jim's countenance instantly transitioned to one of focused professional curiosity. "Your son-in-law," he probed. "What's the nature of this inquiry?" I succinctly recounted the recent events. The ultimatum, my unexpected exit, the shocking revelation of Liam's fraudulent loan application. Jim listened intently, interjecting only with an occasional scratch of his pen. "Liam is certainly a familiar face at the Golden Spire," Jim confirmed once I concluded my narrative. "He's a fixture at the poker tables. The pit bosses have noted his increased frequency and the escalation of his stakes." "Any idea of the total debt?" I pressed. "He's indebted to various parties with varying sums," Jim explained. "We've fielded a number of calls concerning outstanding collections. Nothing overtly criminal has surfaced yet, but the trajectory is certainly pointing that way. I'd conservatively estimate his liabilities range from 20 to 25,000. The sheer magnitude of the figures left me reeling. Liam enjoying the comforts of my home, consuming my provisions, and openly disrespecting me, had simultaneously squandered a sum sufficient to purchase a reliable vehicle. "And these creditors?" I asked. "A blend of conventional financial institutions and less scrupulous individuals," Jim elaborated. "The legitimate entities are growing increasingly antsy. As for the others," Jim said, a slight shrug accompanying his words, "their collection strategies tend to circumvent official channels." "What's his current time frame?" I inquired. "He's been playing for time for roughly 2 months now. Most creditors extend a grace period of 3 to 4 months before intensifying their measures. Liam is rapidly nearing the end of his tether." I departed the precinct with an unsettlingly vivid portrait of my son-in-law's precarious existence. The pervasive gambling addiction clarified everything: his spiraling desperation, his audacious attempt to fraudulently leverage my property, and his escalating hostility towards me. I was no mere conduit for easy cash. I was his final desperate lifeline, his sole shield against potentially ruinous repercussions. That evening, settled back in my motel room, I meticulously reviewed the day's strategic advancements. A formal notice of possession had been legally filed and awaited service. The confirmation of Liam's substantial gambling liabilities, coupled with pervasive deception. My growing network of unlikely allies, professional, discreet, and now fully aware of the true circumstances, was solidifying. I opened my laptop, the screen a cool blue glow, and updated my file, now titled Thorne Reckoning. Detective Jim Miller's sobering assessment was added to Frank Davies's earlier revelations from the bank. Decades in corporate finance had honed my skill in pattern recognition, and the intricate web Liam had woven was now starkly, terrifyingly clear. He wasn't merely disrespectful or conveniently entitled. He was a desperate, duplicitous, and increasingly dangerous man. The more tightly the screws turned on his illicit activities, the more erratic and desperate his behavior would become. I needed to prepare for every eventuality. Tomorrow I would initiate strategic phone calls to Liam's various creditors, not to absolve his debts, for those consequences were entirely his to shoulder. My objective was simply to ensure they possessed a comprehensive understanding of his true financial landscape, crucially including the undeniable fact that he held no legal claim whatsoever to my property. The unvarnished truth, I believed, was the most potent weapon. Word travels with remarkable alacrity in a close-knit community like Willow Creek. By Friday, I understood it was time to seize control of the narrative. My first opportunity presented itself at the local post office where Agnes Henderson, a stalwart of the church's mailing committee, intercepted me near the stamp machine. She was precisely the type of woman who hoarded information with the same zeal others reserved for vintage lace or rare recipes, always eager to disseminate her latest findings. "Arthur Vance, dear," she began, her voice a hushed conspiratorial tone. "I've been hearing the most unsettling whispers about family difficulties. Is everything truly well?" I carefully formulated my reply, knowing that whatever I uttered would be faithfully relayed to at least a dozen congregants before Sunday service. Elaine and Liam requested that I vacate the property, and so I complied. I stated simply, allowing a faint sigh to escape. Sometimes adult children need the space to navigate their own responsibilities. Her eyebrows arched dramatically, her eyes widening in disbelief. "They asked you to leave your own house. It seemed the most sensible arrangement for all parties involved," I offered, feigning a weary resignation. "But didn't you finance their wedding and assist with their down payment?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I always found myself wondering how they managed that residence on Liam's modest salary. I offered a non-committal nod, but chose not to elaborate. The unadorned facts would in due course speak for themselves. My subsequent stop was Miller's Hardware, where I'd enjoyed a part-time position after retiring from the bank. Tom Kowalski, the genial owner, looked up from his meticulously ordered inventory sheets, his expression etched with genuine concern. "Arthur," he exclaimed, "I heard you're staying out at the Wayfarer's Lodge. What in the world is happening?" 3 other employees gravitated towards us as I recounted the essence of the situation, omitting only the most unsavory details. Their reactions were instantaneous and uniformly sympathetic shock that Liam had displayed such egregious disrespect, followed by a palpable anger at the years I'd quietly supported them financially without the slightest acknowledgement. "You paid for their entire university tuition." Dave, the assistant manager, shook his head in absolute disbelief. "Liam told everyone his family was incredibly well-to-do. He even claimed they were contributing to your mortgage payments. Liam has been known to fabricate a great many things," I replied calmly, a subtle bitterness in my tone. Tom's expression hardened considerably. "That certainly explains why he always seemed to have money, but mysteriously never worked overtime," he mused. "We offered him extra shifts countless times, but he always cited other commitments." "Those commitments were undoubtedly at the casino," muttered Sarah from the paint counter, her voice laced with disdain. By the time I exited the hardware store, I knew the genuine story, unvarnished and unedited, would saturate the town's gossip network within mere hours. Willow Creek's informal communication channels were infinitely more efficient than any paid advertising campaign. My third and final stop was St. Jude's Episcopal Church, where Pastor Williams was engrossed in preparations for the upcoming weekend services. He ushered me into his modest office, offering a steaming mug of coffee and gesturing towards a well-worn armchair that had over the years provided solace to countless troubled parishioners. "Arthur," he began, his voice imbued with a gentle sincerity, "several members of our flock have expressed profound concern for your well-being. Can you help me understand what precisely is unfolding? I deeply appreciated Pastor Williams's directness. He wasn't seeking sensational gossip. He was genuinely striving to offer pastoral care to a member of his congregation. "Pastor," I began, my voice steady. "For the past 5 years, I have provided extensive financial support to my daughter and son-in-law. Last weekend, they made it explicitly clear that my continued presence in my own home was contingent upon my unreserved subservience to Liam's directives. I chose to depart rather than accede to such an arrangement. That must have been an agonizing decision." He observed his gaze, empathetic. It was clarifying. I responded truthfully, the words resonating with a newfound inner peace. "I love my daughter dearly, but I refuse to be treated as a disposable commodity, treated like a mere subordinate in my own dwelling." Pastor Williams inclined his head, a contemplative expression on his face. "Indeed, true affection sometimes necessitates the allowance for others to confront the repercussions of their own actions. It appears you have perhaps inadvertently shielded them from these realities for a considerable duration. One might even argue excessively so. My return stroll to the lodge led me to the daily grind, where I paused for a quiet afternoon beverage. The cafe buzzed with its typical Friday throng. Local elders, workers unwinding after their shifts, young parents navigating strollers. I secured a secluded table and allowed the currents of conversation to wash over me. Before long, I distinctly caught snippets. Liam Thorne's deep in debt all over town. "Arthur Vance, he's been covering their expenses for years, hasn't he?" Always struck me as peculiar how they maintained such a comfortable lifestyle on Liam's reported income, when the narrative was disseminating precisely as I had foreseen. Small communities, I reflected, functioned much like interconnected nervous systems, processing and sifting information with remarkable speed and an intuitive collective discernment for truth. As I was exiting the daily grind, my phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed Mrs. Gable, my former next-door neighbor of 2 decades. "Arthur, I do hope you don't mind this call." Mrs. Gable began, her voice hushed, with evident concern. "I felt compelled to inform you. There's been a considerable amount of shouting at your old residence lately. Predominantly Liam, but Elaine as well. And yesterday the patrol car drove past, not once, but twice." "Thank you for alerting me, Mrs. Gable," I responded, my voice steady. "I truly appreciate you keeping an informal watch over matters. Are you quite secure where you're staying, dear? Do you require anything at all?" Her authentic solicitude served as a potent reminder that communal solidarity manifested in myriad unexpected ways. "I am quite well, thank you," I assured her, simply navigating circumstances one day at a time. That evening, ensconced in the quiet of my lodge room, I replayed the day's various exchanges. The subtle yet powerful social pressure was accumulating organically, entirely devoid of any vindictive machinations on my part. Individuals I mused simply possessed an innate capacity to discern inequity when it was presented with unvarnished clarity. My phone rang once more. An unrecognized number, yet the area code was unmistakably familiar. A likely representative from one of Liam's creditors. I allowed the call to divert to voicemail, then retrieved the message. "This is Marcus Thorne from Summit Capital Group. We are attempting to reach Liam Thorne regarding a significantly overdue account. Kindly return our call at your earliest convenience." They were clearly contacting me because Liam had, with his characteristic audacity, listed my former residence as his official address on his numerous credit applications. This was yet another damning piece of evidence of his systematic deception, further proof that his elaborate scheme had always included transferring his financial liabilities onto my shoulders. I deleted the message, then opened my laptop, ready to update my Thorn Reckoning file with today's unsettling discoveries. I should have anticipated their counter-assault. Liam Thorne, after all, was never one to yield without a protracted, messy struggle. Saturday morning commenced with an almost deceptive tranquility. I was methodically reviewing bank statements over my usual black coffee when my phone's insistent ring broke the silence. First Tom from Miller's Hardware, then Agnes Henderson, followed by Pastor Williams. Each call delivered the identical disquieting bulletin. Liam Thorne was actively circulating through town, systematically propagating a thoroughly distorted version of recent events. Arthur, I believe you need to be made aware of his current fabrications. Tom's voice resonated with barely restrained indignation. He entered the store approximately an hour ago, as boisterous as ever, emphatically proclaiming that you simply abandoned them without a shred of warning. He's claiming you vowed to perpetually provide for them, then inexplicably reneged on your word out of pure malice. And what precisely are his other assertions? I inquired, my voice flat. He's suggesting you're experiencing some form of cognitive decline, a mental breakdown, if you will. Tom hesitated for a moment. He further asserted that you ejected them because Elaine refused to concede absolute control over every facet of their lives. He added with a note of incredulity. He's also baselessly alleging a severe family medical emergency, supposedly necessitating immediate funds, which you are callously refusing to provide. I extended my thanks to Tom and ended the call, my mind already meticulously dissecting the various implications. Liam evidently was sufficiently desperate to instigate a full-blown public relations offensive, a clear indication that the mounting pressure from his increasingly insistent creditors was intensifying dramatically. The subsequent incoming call served only to corroborate my immediate suspicions. "Mr. Vance," the caller began. "Mr. Vance, this is Sergeant Davies calling on behalf of Detective Miller. I wanted to give you a preliminary notification. Liam Thorne was here this morning attempting to file an official complaint regarding alleged elder abuse. He's claiming you're being manipulated by an unscrupulous individual at the bank, leading you to make demonstrably unsound financial decisions. Elder abuse. Utterly preposterous, naturally. Yet his objective was transparent, to establish an official, albeit baseless, record of my supposed mental incapacity. We informed him we'd need to thoroughly investigate such serious accusations, of course." Sergeant Davies continued his tone, suggesting the sheer absurdity of the claim. Liam's absurd allegations of elder abuse were predictably going nowhere due to a distinct lack of any substantiating evidence. Less than half an hour later, my phone chimed again, displaying Elaine's number. "Father, please answer." Her voice, ragged with what sounded like distress, pleaded through the speaker. "I know you're upset, but you don't grasp the full gravity of this situation. I'm carrying a child, Father. The relentless stress from all of this. It's jeopardizing the pregnancy. My physician warns that if matters don't stabilize, I face the risk of miscarriage. A familiar knot tightened in my gut, the echo of a protective impulse that had for too many years been weaponized against me. Yet beneath the apparent anguish, I detected a calculated, almost theatrical desperation in her delivery. "Congratulations on the impending arrival, my dear," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "When did you receive this joyful news?" A beat of silence. "Just last week," she finally murmured. "Right before our entire world crumbled," she added, her voice convincingly cracking. "Father, I cannot bear the thought of losing my baby simply due to financial turmoil." You always instilled in me that family takes precedence above all else. Family unequivocally does come first, I affirmed a measured response. That is precisely why I invested a considerable sum in your university education and financed your elaborate wedding without question. But what about now? She pressed a tremor in her tone. What about the well-being of your own grandchild? The unspoken weight of her plea filled the air. A tiny sliver of doubt gnawed at me. If her pregnancy was truly in jeopardy, if a genuine medical crisis loomed, then my current course of action might indeed carry unforeseen and regrettable repercussions. Yet the timing felt remarkably, almost impossibly coincidental. The emotional plea too artfully deployed. Elaine, I inquired carefully, have you consulted a physician regarding these complications you mentioned? A beat of hesitation. I have an appointment scheduled for next week. And with whom is this appointment? Dr. Holloway at the Willow Creek Women's Clinic. I recognized the name. Eleanor had been a patient of hers for a decade. I'll contact her office directly, I stated, cutting through her protest to ascertain the precise nature of the situation and determine how I might assist with any medical costs. Father, you absolutely do not need to call her Elaine, interjected her voice, rising in pitch. If there's a legitimate medical emergency concerning my grandchild, then I fully intend to provide assistance. Dr. Holloway will know the appropriate course of action. Elaine's tone sharpened, bordering on accusatory. You cannot simply ring my doctor. That's a violation of privacy. You are correct, I conceded smoothly. However, you can certainly ask Dr. Holloway to contact me herself to discuss any financial arrangements for your prenatal care. The line went dead abruptly. An hour or so later, as I was making my way through the bustling town square, I spotted Liam outside the imposing facade of the First National Bank. He was holding court, his voice booming, radiating that same hostile energy I'd come to instantly recognize. He's completely unhinged, Liam was declaring to a small cluster of curious onlookers. The man's spiraling thinks everyone's plotting against him. Threw his own daughter out of her home, a pregnant woman at that, all over some petty grudge. I walked purposefully towards the burgeoning group. Before Liam, transfixed by his own narrative, even noticed my approach, the crowd's collective gaze shifted. Faces, initially curious, morphed into expressions of sudden recognition as they identified the man Liam was so loudly slandering. Liam spun on his heel, his face instantly a blotchy crimson. There he is, he bellowed, pointing a finger. The man who disowned his own flesh and blood. Liam replied, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. How are those gambling debts progressing, Liam? My question struck him with the force of a physical impact. A ripple of murmuring swept through the bystanders, the pieces of an emerging scandal, visibly clicking into place. You're delusional, Liam spluttered, his bluster temporarily deflating. I have no idea what you're rambling about. $22,000 to be precise, I calmly corrected him. According to Detective Miller, mostly at the Golden Spire playing poker. I surveyed the now attentive crowd, a slight knowing smile playing on my lips. It's truly astonishing how quickly one can accumulate such substantial losses when they're not burdened with the trivialities of paying for their own rent, utilities, or even groceries. Liam's face, already flushed, deepened to a furious purple. He took a menacing step forward, attempting to leverage his considerable height as a weapon. You insane old fool. You can't possibly. I can meticulously document every single dollar I've spent supporting you for the past 5 years, I interjected, cutting him off mid-bluster. Can you, however, provide similar documentation for where your paychecks have vanished? The crowd was utterly rapt, silently absorbing this new explosive data point. Liam's eyes darted around, recognizing with chilling clarity that he had utterly forfeited control of the burgeoning narrative. "Let's go," he snarled, shoving his way through the stunned onlookers. "This isn't finished, Arthur." I watched him stomp away, observing with a detached satisfaction, as several individuals in the crowd, without a word, discreetly pulled out their mobile phones. The unvarnished truth I knew would be blazing across social media feeds and community forums within the hour. Back in the tranquil solitude of my lodge room, I powered up my laptop, the screen a soft glow in the dim light, and began meticulously recording the day's unfolding drama. Liam's desperate counteroffensive was already crumbling, built as it was on a foundation of transparent falsehoods that simply could not withstand public scrutiny. Willow Creek, after all, knew my character far too intimately to genuinely credit his baseless accusations of mental deterioration or vindictive abandonment. Yet the purported pregnancy, the supposed pregnancy, was a vexing concern. If Elaine truly carried a child, the calculus of this estrangement certainly shifted. I needed to verify her claim before any subsequent move. I retrieved my phone and dialed Dr. Holloway's office. If a genuine medical emergency were unfolding, I would extend assistance, but I would not permit myself to be manipulated by a fabricated crisis. Liam's public outbursts had clearly crossed a critical boundary. Returning to my modest room at the Wayfarer's Lodge, I immediately contacted Detective Jim Miller. "Jim, we need to speak," I began, my voice steady. "Liam's conduct today indicates a worrying pattern of escalation." "How so?" he inquired. He confronted me publicly engaged in openly threatening gestures before witnesses, and his entire demeanor suggested a man teetering on the edge of control. My gaze drifted towards the vibrant lights of downtown from my motel window. I wish to file a formal complaint and explore protective measures. "Come in tomorrow morning," Jim instructed. "Bring any relevant documentation you possess, but I wouldn't need to wait until the morning." Steve Brennan, the Pine Lodge night manager, knocked on my door barely an hour later. "Mr. Vance," he began, his voice lowered. "That man who was shouting in our parking lot earlier returned about 20 minutes ago." He paused, stood outside your door for perhaps 5 minutes, then departed, made a few guests quite uneasy. Steve, a retired Army sergeant, possessed an uncanny knack for discerning brewing trouble. "Did he utter anything specific?" I asked. "Muttered something about teaching old fools lessons," Steve replied. "I've got it all on security video if you require it. Security footage, concrete evidence of Liam's threatening behavior on private property. A significant development." "Steve, would you be prepared to furnish that footage to the police?" I asked. "Absolutely," he affirmed without hesitation. "Men like that have no business intimidating elderly residents." The following morning, I arrived at the police station armed with Steve's security USB drive and a meticulously compiled timeline of Liam's escalating aggression. Detective Miller reviewed the materials with a quiet, professional thoroughness. "Arthur, this paints a clear picture of intimidation. Coupled with what I personally observed yesterday at the bank, we possess ample grounds for a restraining order." "What would that entail?" I inquired. "A legal prohibition preventing Liam from approaching within 500 feet of you or any property belonging to you. Any violation means immediate arrest." Jim leaned back, a pensive expression on his face. "There's something else you should know. Liam consulted with a lawyer on Friday about adverse possession laws." The word struck me with the chilling force of cold water. "Squatters' rights," I mused aloud. Precisely. Jim confirmed, his expression grim. He was investigating whether he could legally claim ownership of your house based on his continuous occupancy. Montana law mandates 5 years of hostile occupation for such a claim. They've been there 3. He intended to bide his time for 2 more years, then file a claim. The implications were staggering. Liam hadn't merely been freeloading. He had been meticulously executing a long-term scheme to seize my family home through a legal loophole. Does he possess any legitimate claim? I asked, though I already knew the answer. None whatsoever, Jim stated unequivocally. Adverse possession requires hostile occupation, meaning without the owner's permission. Since you granted them permission to live there, and they've never contributed to rent or property taxes, there's no legal basis. Jim pulled out a fresh file folder, but it undeniably demonstrates premeditation. He's been orchestrating this theft for years. What about the restraining order? I pressed. Given the evidence, I can fast-track it. You'll have it by this afternoon. I departed the police station with a profound, disquieting new understanding of my son-in-law's true character. The initial beer incident had not been a mere power play. It had been a calculated maneuver to maintain a deception that he intended to culminate in the outright theft of my home. As I walked back to my car, I retrieved my phone and scrolled through my contacts. It was time to make some truly strategic calls. The first was to Marcus Webb at Frontier Financial Services, one of Liam's creditors who had persistently been contacting my number. Mr. Webb, I began, my voice firm and clear. I'm returning your call regarding Liam Thorne. I need to clarify an essential fact. He no longer resides at my address and possesses no legal claim whatsoever to my property. While he listed that address as his residence on his credit applications, he was, in fact, merely a guest in my home. I evicted him last week. My focus shifted to the labyrinthine world of collection agencies. The second, then third, then fourth calls were to various firms hounding Liam Thorne. Good morning, this is Arthur Vance. I'd begin, my voice clipped and professional. I understand you're attempting to reach Liam Thorne regarding his outstanding liabilities. I need to make it unequivocally clear Mr. Thorne no longer resides at my property, nor does he possess any ownership interest in it. He was, in essence, a guest. Each conversation was brief, devoid of emotion, a simple correction of a deliberately misleading address. By early afternoon, having spoken to over 6 such agencies, Liam's carefully constructed edifice of deceit felt poised for imminent collapse. Later that afternoon, the formidable signature of Judge Alastair Crowley adorned my restraining order. Liam Thorne was now legally barred from approaching within 500 feet of my person or any property registered under my name. A breach of this order would carry the immediate consequence of arrest and potential incarceration. Driving back to the Wayfarer's Lodge, a quiet sense of vindication settled over me. He had spent years meticulously plotting to appropriate my home. Now he couldn't even legally set foot near it. My phone vibrated with an ominous text from an unrecognized number. "This isn't finished, old man." I promptly forwarded the message to Detective Miller, then unhesitatingly blocked the sender. Documenting Liam's increasingly erratic behavior had become a reflex. By Monday morning, with the restraining order formally filed and effective, I felt the tightening noose of consequence closing in from every direction. The courthouse clerk, a picture of efficient authority, affixed the final stamp to the order. "Mr. Vance," she affirmed, her voice crisp, "this directive is now in effect. Any attempt at contact or proximity within the 500-foot exclusion zone constitutes a direct violation. I expressed my gratitude, then walked calmly to my vehicle, fully aware that a sheriff's deputy would be delivering Liam's official papers within mere hours. My phone began to ring as I started the engine. It was Michael Brennan, the owner of Summit Ridge Motors, where Liam worked. Michael was a man of integrity, having built his thriving dealership on years of unwavering trust. "Arthur," he began, his tone uncharacteristically serious, "I need to ask you directly if what Liam's been circulating about you holds any truth. And what precisely has he been circulating?" I queried, my voice flat. "He's claiming you've suffered some kind of mental collapse, that you're experiencing a severe cognitive decline, and that you capriciously ejected them from your home. He's even spreading rumors about a dire family medical crisis, which you're allegedly refusing to address." Michael's voice, though guarded, held a clear undercurrent of skepticism. "Truth be told, Arthur, I've known you for over 2 decades. This narrative doesn't align with the man who vouched for my son's very first car loan." "Michael," I responded, a faint sigh escaping my lips. "Liam presented me with a choice: absolute subservience to his directives or immediate departure from my own residence. I chose the latter. There is no medical emergency, and my mental faculties, as my banker, my legal counsel, and Detective Miller can readily attest, remain perfectly sound." A prolonged silence stretched between us. "I was afraid of that." Michael finally conceded, his voice heavy. "Arthur, I've had 3 separate clients today, all mentioning Liam's outstanding debts. One even recognized him from the gaming tables at the Golden Spire. This situation is undeniably impacting my business." He paused again, clearly weighing his words. "I'm left with little option but to let him go. I cannot afford this kind of public controversy around a business built on customer trust." Barely 20 minutes later, sipping my coffee at the Daily Grind, I witnessed the distinct insignia of Coastal Credit Services on a sedan pulling into the driveway of my former residence. I recognized them. I had specifically contacted them on Friday regarding Liam's fraudulent address. Moments later, my phone vibrated. Elaine's name flashed on the screen. "Father." Her voice was a raw shriek of panic. "There are men here. They're demanding to know about Liam's debts, about our assets, our income, everything." "And what did you tell them?" I asked, my tone unmoved. "I told them the truth, that Liam doesn't own this house and no longer lives here. But they're talking about garnishing his wages, seizing assets." "Father, I don't understand any of this." "My dear," I explained calmly, "those are the inevitable repercussions when someone borrows money they cannot repay. These are consequences entirely of Liam's own making, not mine." "He owes—" "How much?" she stammered. $18,000, according to Detective Miller, primarily from the poker tables at the Golden Spire Casino." A stunned silence fell over the line, then a fragile whisper. "He told me he was working overtime those nights. I'm truly sorry you're discovering this under such distressing circumstances, Elaine. And the sheriff's deputy was here earlier, too," she added, her voice regaining a tremor of fear. "Served Liam some official papers. He's been ranting and throwing things ever since. The restraining order." Liam was undoubtedly just beginning to grasp the full extent of his unraveling world, that his options had completely evaporated. "Clark, he's talking about leaving town. Says there's nothing left here for him." Her voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do? Make decisions based on who Harry truly is, not who you had hoped he might be." That evening, I parked across the street from my former residence and observed the unfolding chaos. 3 distinct creditor vehicles had visited throughout the day. The elderly Mr. Henderson next door offered a sorrowful wave. He had been monitoring the escalating situation with the deep concern of a long-standing neighbor. Through the living room window, I could discern Harry and Tiffany embroiled in a heated argument. His gestures were aggressive, frantic. Hers appeared defensive, frightened. The gilded marriage, meticulously constructed upon my financial scaffolding, was visibly crumbling as reality forcibly intruded. My phone buzzed. A text from Steve, the night manager at the Wayfarers' Lodge. That fellow tried to get in the building again, told him about the restraining order. He left, but he was truly enraged. I promptly forwarded the message to Detective Reynolds. Harry was brazenly violating the restraining order within hours of being served. His desperation was rendering him reckless, which undeniably made him dangerous. Yet it also rendered him starkly predictable. A desperate man, burdened by gambling debts, devoid of employment, and mired in legal entanglements, possessed remarkably limited options. He could either confront his responsibilities like an adult, or he could flee. Given my newfound understanding of Harry's character, flight seemed the most probable course. I drove back to the Wayfarers' Lodge, contemplating the implications. If Harry absconded to evade his creditors, what fate awaited Tiffany? Would she accompany him, choosing loyalty to a man who had systematically deceived her for years? Or would she at long last perceive him with clarity and make an entirely different choice? Either way, the consequences would be theirs to face. I had spent 5 years shielding them from reality. That protection had ceased the moment they demanded I choose between my dignity and their demands. I had chosen dignity. Now they could chart their own path forward. 2 days of witnessing their desperation was sufficient. I called Tiffany Wednesday morning and instructed her to meet me at the diner. Just her. I can't leave Harry alone right now, Clark. He's really struggling with everything that's happening. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order means I can't be around him anyway. A prolonged silence stretched between us. Where do you want to meet? Willow Creek Diner, the back corner booth where we can talk privately. I arrived early and selected the booth facing away from the street. I wanted this conversation to be focused solely on words, devoid of worried glances at passing cars. When Tiffany arrived, she looked considerably older than her 28 years. Stress lines were etched around her eyes, and she nervously fidgeted with her purse strap. She slid into the opposite seat and immediately began speaking. Clark, I know you're angry, but Harry's lost his job, and these debt collectors won't leave us alone. The phone rings constantly. People are showing up at the door demanding money we don't have. I waited until she finished, then spoke calmly. I'm offering you one chance to end this with some semblance of dignity, Tiffany. What do you mean? Public acknowledgement of the truth. Full disclosure of how extensively I've supported you both, and an honest explanation of precisely why I left. Her face flushed. You want me to humiliate myself in front of the entire town? I want you to tell the truth. There's a considerable difference. What kind of acknowledgement? I had spent 2 days meticulously considering what true justice required. A detailed announcement at Sunday service during the testimony time. A letter to the editor of the local Tribune, explicitly detailing the circumstances. And a comprehensive Facebook post, visible to all our mutual connections. Full details about your university tuition, your wedding costs, the mortgage payments, and the explicit ultimatum that compelled my departure. Clark, people will think you had a father who loved you enough to sacrifice his retirement security for your happiness, and that you took it entirely for granted until it was irretrievably gone. Tiffany stared at her untouched coffee. What about Harry? Harry is no longer a part of any equation involving. The protection order in place against him was absolute. If your path remains intertwined with Liam, that is your prerogative. But understand it inherently signifies a severance from me. You perceive this as choosing between a spouse and a parent. I present it as a choice between a man who menaced me and the person who nurtured you. Your perception of those options as morally equivalent reveals the vast chasm that has opened between us. Elaine remained silent, absorbing the weight of my words. But the house, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. It's been the Vance homestead for a century. It is now allocated to the Cedar Creek Family Shelter, Elaine. It will house single mothers and their children, providing refuge for those who truly comprehend the meaning of struggle and resilience. My declaration landed with the force of a physical blow. The necessary legal amendments to my estate were finalized weeks ago, duly witnessed, signed, and lodged with my counsel. My tone remained gentle, yet unyielding. Even if you flawlessly execute every condition I've outlined, the property will not revert to your possession. That determination is immutable. Why? She pleaded, her voice breaking. Because I require any prospect of renewed connection between us to be founded solely upon genuine affection, unburdened by the expectation of inheritance. For half a decade, I was little more than a perpetual ATM to you both. I need to ascertain if any vestige of a true relationship remains between us beyond mere financial expediency. Elaine's eyes welled with tears, genuine ones for the first time, devoid of the theatricality I had become accustomed to. "I'm so profoundly sorry, Father," she choked out. "I never envisioned such a complete disintegration." "Sorrow holds insufficient weight now, my dear," I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. "This entire community bore witness to the way you and Liam treated me as a menial within my own four walls. They observed your deliberate choice to prioritize his arbitrary demands over my fundamental dignity. Mere words now carry no currency. I require irrefutable actions. What if I lack the courage?" She whispered, her gaze downcast. "What if I cannot face everyone and confess the profound error of our ways?" "Then you will bear the full weight of that decision's repercussions. Liam will almost certainly abscond from town to evade his mounting creditors. Individuals of his character invariably flee when faced with adversity. You are at liberty to accompany him and attempt a fresh start elsewhere, or you may choose to remain here and endeavor to reconstruct your life on a foundation of integrity. Should you undertake the actions I require, then perhaps with the passage of time, we might forge a true connection, one not predicated on financial considerations, nor guilt, nor obligation, but rather on the mutual esteem between two mature individuals." Elaine dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled napkin. "How much time do I have to determine my course?" "Sunday morning," I stated definitively. "Service commences at precisely 10 o'clock. Your absence or your failure to speak the truth will unequivocally signal your decision." She rose ponderously, appearing years older and far more fragile than when she had first entered. "Father," she pleaded, her voice thin, "do you believe you could ever truly forgive me?" I allowed my gaze to truly linger on my daughter, discerning fleeting echoes of the child who once meticulously braided dandelion chains and insisted on tales of valorous princesses before sleep. Forgiveness and trust, Elaine, are distinct entities. I extended my forgiveness the very day I chose to depart, rather than engage in a futile conflict. But trust, my dear, must be painstakingly re-earned, one genuine forthright action at a time. She offered a small nod and moved towards the exit. Her shoulders bowed beneath the immense burden of a choice that would irrevocably shape her future. I stayed in the booth, observing her car disappear down the street. Sunday was 4 days distant. By then, I would possess clarity regarding whether my daughter truly possessed the fortitude to prioritize verity over convenience and accountability over a misplaced allegiance to an individual utterly unworthy of it. Sunday morning dawned crisp and frigid. I entered St. Jude's, my thoughts consumed by whether Elaine would indeed unearth the courage to confess the truth. The sanctuary appeared unusually full. Word had clearly disseminated concerning a significant family disclosure. I settled into my customary pew 3 rows from the altar and awaited the unfolding events. Pastor Williams commenced the service with customary hymns and scriptural readings, yet the palpable anticipation within the congregation was undeniable. When the time for personal testimonies arrived, Elaine rose from her position in the furthest row. She appeared diminished as she progressed down the central aisle, but her steps remained resolutely firm. Reaching the rostrum, she gripped its edges and surveyed the familiar visages that had composed her world since childhood. I have something of critical importance to convey to you all regarding my father. Her voice, though strained, resonated with clarity throughout the hushed sanctuary. For the past 5 years, my father, Arthur Vance, had been the sole financial pillar for Liam and me. He sacrificed $160,000 for my university education, an expense I'd insisted upon when a state school would have sufficed. He then paid the entire $25,000 for my wedding, because Liam's family conveniently found themselves unable to contribute their promised share. Murmurs rippled through the hushed sanctuary. These were not vague accusations, but precise figures, quantifiable sacrifices that painted an undeniable picture. He even gave us his family home, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. The house his parents had left him where he'd lived, with my mother Eleanor, for 2 decades. When we couldn't make mortgage payments, he covered them. When we needed groceries, utilities, car insurance, he paid for everything, all while living solely on his Social Security income. Her voice strengthened, gaining a heartbreaking clarity as she pressed on. 3 weeks ago, when my father refused to meekly obey Liam's directives like a mere servant, we gave him an ultimatum: conform to Liam's demands or vacate his own home. Dad, with an astounding display of quiet resolve, chose to leave rather than surrender his dignity. The sanctuary was utterly silent now, every ear straining to catch her every word. Even the children, usually restless, seemed to sense the immense gravity of the moment. I stood by Elaine, confessed her voice, thick with self-reproach, and watched my husband blatantly disrespect the man who had systematically sacrificed his retirement security for our comfort. I chose a misplaced loyalty to someone who threatened my father over the unwavering love and patience of the man who had raised me. Tears flowed freely now, coursing down her face, yet her voice remained remarkably clear. I am standing here today because my father, with an act of profound grace, offered me one last solitary chance to choose truth over my own pride. I was wrong. Liam was wrong. My father deserved not ultimatums and demands, but boundless gratitude and unwavering respect. She looked directly at Arthur, her eyes brimming with a raw, unvarnished regret. Dad, I'm sorry isn't nearly enough for what we put you through, but I'm hoping, truly hoping, that this is a start. The congregation erupted in a wave of supportive murmurs and empathetic suts as Elaine, visibly unburdened, made her way back to her seat. Pastor Williams approached the podium, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Sometimes he began his voice resonating with deep emotion. The most profound courage lies in publicly acknowledging our mistakes. Elaine has demonstrated that rare courage today. and her father, Arthur, has shown us all what true dignity looks like under immense pressure. After the service, parishioners approached Arthur in a steady stream, offering embraces, firm handshakes, and heartfelt words of support. Mrs. Henderson, his former neighbor, squeezed his hand tightly. "We all suspected you were helping them financially, Arthur," she confided, her voice low. "What we never truly understood was the magnitude of their ingratitude." Tom Kowalski from the hardware store clapped Arthur's shoulder. "That took real character, Arthur, what you did. Setting boundaries, especially with family, is never easy, but it's essential." But the most poignant moment came when Elaine approached him outside the church, her eyes still red-rimmed, but holding a newfound clarity. "The letter to the Tribune will run Wednesday," she confirmed, her voice quiet. "And the Facebook post goes up tonight." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her clasped hands. "Liam. He left town yesterday, packed his truck while I was at work, and simply disappeared. No forwarding address, no note, nothing." Arthur wasn't surprised. Men like Liam invariably fled when confronted with the full, unvarnished weight of their consequences. "I'm sorry your marriage ended this way, Elaine," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm not," she replied, her voice firm, startling him slightly. "I filed for divorce this morning. Found out he'd been using my credit cards for his gambling debts without telling me. The total liabilities are even worse than we initially thought." 3 months later, Arthur stood in the front yard of his former family home, a profound sense of peace settling over him as he watched 3 single mothers and their children move into the meticulously renovated transitional housing units that the Cedar Creek Family Shelter had established. The house, once a source of endless financial and emotional strain, had been transformed into separate, private apartments. Each family afforded their own space while sharing welcoming common areas. Sarah Miller, a young mother with 2 toddlers, approached him, her face radiating exhausted gratitude. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "This opportunity means everything to us. Thank you for choosing families like ours for this incredible gift." "Families like yours," Arthur replied, a quiet smile gracing his lips, "truly understand the meaning of struggle and resilience. This house should serve those who truly comprehend its value and have earned a genuine fresh start." His own life had settled into peaceful, deeply satisfying routines. At the lakeside cabin he'd purchased, its windows overlooking the shimmering expanse of Flathead Lake. Money was no longer flowing into the bottomless pit of ungrateful dependence, allowing him to savor simple, previously overlooked pleasures that now felt utterly luxurious after years of unrelenting financial stress and family drama. Morning coffee on the deck, afternoons spent casting a line into the clear water, evenings lost in the pages of a good book. The cabin was small, unassuming, but perfectly suited to his newfound serenity. The cabin, though modest, contained all Arthur truly needed. Now a cozy living area, a compact kitchen, perfect for preparing his own meals, without the constant clatter of a restaurant, and 2 bedrooms that echoed with quietude instead of chaos. Outside, a simple wooden dock extended into the shimmering expanse of Flathead Lake, a perfect launching point for his small fishing boat, now his most cherished companion. His phone vibrated, pulling him from his quiet contemplation. It was a text from Elaine. "Father," it read, "I've been attending therapy for a few months now, focusing on healthier patterns of interaction. I was wondering, would you consider meeting for coffee sometime? I want to genuinely reestablish our connection, one honest conversation at a time." Arthur's gaze drifted across the lake, where an osprey plunged gracefully into the shallows, emerging with a silvery flash. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Arthur's lips. Elaine had indeed meticulously fulfilled her end of the unspoken agreement. The letter published in the Willow Creek Tribune had been astonishingly candid, detailing every financial sacrifice, every ultimatum, every moment of familial neglect. Her social media post, equally stark in its honesty, had resonated deeply within the community, eliciting a flood of sympathetic comments and a palpable shift in public opinion. She hadn't just offered an apology. She had shouldered accountability. Arthur carefully typed his reply. "The diner, Saturday morning. Coffee sounds suitable." Her immediate response warmed his hand. "Thank you, Father. I'll be there. And truly thank you for not completely abandoning hope for me." He set the phone gently on the table, watching as the osprey soared upwards, its talons firmly gripping its prey, a triumphant arc against the fading light. He had carried a profound weight for years, but now a quiet dignity had been reclaimed. Patience, he realized, was not passive waiting, but steadfast resolve, and its rewards, though long in coming, were profound. The setting sun cast an ethereal glow over the distant Rockies, painting the lake in hues of molten gold and deep amber. From across the lake, carried on the gentle evening breeze, he could faintly hear the joyous laughter of children. He pictured the Cedar Creek family shelter, his former home, now a vibrant sanctuary where new families flourished, building lives rooted in true resilience. He had learned the difficult distinction between genuine generosity and self-defeating enablement. Justice meticulously sought and finally achieved had been served. His dignity, hard won, was preserved. And perhaps his daughter was at long last truly prepared to re-earn his trust through genuine effort and unvarnished truth, rather than the hollow currency of manipulation. It had indeed been worth the arduous, solitary wait.